At your Social Security office will change. Seniors won't be able to prove their identity over the phone, and those who can't navigate the online service will have to go into the office to update information.
The Trump administration believes this will crack down on fraud. As First Alert 6 reporter John Chapman shows us, some local seniors are worried about the rollout.
Volunteers Assisting Seniors is a Nebraska statewide health information program. Here, they provide information for seniors new to Medicare and information on other Medicare-related programs. And even though it's not in their wheelhouse, lately they've been hearing from seniors about the new in-person sign-up for Social Security.
We get calls fairly regularly, several times a week, from people who are anxious and concerned. Some are scared, honestly. They don't know what the new changes are going to mean and how that's going to impact them and what that access might look like.
Valerie Couch is a barber. She's worried about the trip to the Social Security office she has to make soon to sign up for benefits.
I was concerned about how long the lines would be. Do I have to go down there and make an appointment because or is the phone lines going to be available to make an appointment?
Omaha's Social Security office is located in the Old Mill area, open 9 to 4 with service by appointment only. Those appointments can be made on the Social Security website. But for Valerie and other seniors, navigating a computer is not their strong point.
I am probably going to get somebody to help me use the computer because, like I said, I don't trust myself to get it right.
Pastor Michael Williams leads Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. The community leader says there are many people worried about the change and worried about the new routine that could delay Social Security benefits they count on.
It's going to be devastating the longer it's in place. I think people are in shock. People are stressed enough already. And when this really takes effect, I think it's going to throw people into turmoil. I think part of government's role is to make life easier, not to make life harder. And certainly this is going to make life harder.
In Omaha, I'm John Chapman, First Alert 6.
The changes go into effect this upcoming Monday, March 31st. And again, it applies for people signing up for new Social Security benefits and for current recipients who need to change their direct deposit information. We have information on navigating these changes on this story at firstalert6.com.